Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to English Corner. In this lesson we'll talk about a famous elegy of English literature, Elegy written in a country churchyard, composed by Thomas Gray. I'm sure you can remember in our class just before the unwanted coronavirus vacation, we talked about different aspects and characteristics of elegy, types of elegy, and some related things. So today we'll have a close discussion and analysis of the poem. But before that, let us have a look at the biographical information of Thomas Gray. This elegy was first published in 1751, and Gray probably had begun writing this poem in 1742, shortly after the death of his close friend Richard West. We talked about elegy, and we already know that an elegy is a poem that laments the dead. This elegy is noteworthy in that it mourns the death not of great or famous people, but of common men. Here the speaker of the poem sees a country churchyard at sunset, which impels him to meditate on the nature of human mortality. This poem invokes the classical idea of memento mori, which is a Latin phrase meaning remember that you must die. The speaker considers the fact that in death there is no difference between great and common people. He goes on to wonder if among the lowly people buried in the churchyard there had been any natural poets or politicians whose talent had simply never been discovered or nurtured. This thought leads him to praise the dead for the honest, simple lives that they lived. Gray did not produce a great deal of poetry indeed, but this poem had earned him a respected and a deserved place in English literature. We know that the poem was written at the end of the Augustan Age and at the beginning of the Romantic period. So, we see the characteristics of both classical as well as Romantic periods. On one hand, it is ordered, balanced regarding phrasing and rational sentiments of neoclassical poetry. On the other hand, it has a tendency towards the emotionalism and individualism of the Romantic poets. Most importantly, it idealizes and upholds the common man. Gray was born in London in 1716, and he could not have a very happy family life with his parents. In 1738, he left Cambridge without taking a degree, and he intended to study law in London. However, he had a lot of good friends, and one of his friends was Horace Walpole, the son of Robert Walpole, the Prime Minister of then England. In 1738, he and his friend Walpole went to a tour to Europe, and in 1741 they had a quarrel. However, they could have the mitigation of their quarrel, and then he went to his mother to Stoke Poges, Buckinghamshire, and began his most productive period of poetic composition. There he worked on Elegy written in a country churchyard, though this poem was not published until 1751. In 1757, Gray was offered the position of poet laureate, but he declined it. He moved to London in 1759 to study at the British Museum and remained there for 2 years. He read widely and earned a reputation as one of the most learned men in Europe. Until 1761, he remained at Cambridge, and in 1768 he was named Regius Professor of Modern History at Cambridge, and he died in 1771. Now let us talk about the poem itself. In the first stanza, the speaker talks about a country day, a rural day, drawing to a close. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly over the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. A curfew bell is ringing, a herd of cattle moving across the pasture, and a farm laborer returning home. The speaker is then left alone to contemplate the isolated rural scene. The first line of the poem sets a distinctly somber tone. The curfew bell does not simply ring, it knells, which is a term usually applied to the bell rung at the death or funeral. From the start then, Gray reminds us of human mortality. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds. Save where the beetle wheels his droning flight and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. In the second stanza, the somber tone is retained, but here the speaker is not mournful, but thoughtful, pensive, and he describes the peaceful landscape that surrounds him. Even the air is characterized as having a solemn stillness. So, as the darkness is descending upon the world and the landscape is glimmering, and there is no sound surrounding him except the droning flight, the sound of the droning flight of the beetle. So, there is a drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Save that from yonder ivy-mantled tower the moping owl does to the moon complain, of such as wandering near her secret bower molest her ancient solitary reign. The third stanza, there is a sound of an owl hooting intrudes upon the evening quiet. So the quietness of the evening is broken by the hooting of the owl, and we are told that the owl complains to the moon. In this context, the word does not mean to whine or to grumble, but to express sorrow. The owl's call then is suggestive of grief. Note that at no point in these three opening stanzas does Gray directly refer to death or a funeral. Rather, he indirectly creates a funeral atmosphere by describing just a few mournful sounds. Probably the owl is threatened by some of her enemies. He is complaining to the moon. And we see that the word save has been used a number of times. Here, save means except, without. Beneath those rugged elms that yet reshed, where heavens the turf in many a mouldering heap, each in this narrow cell forever laid, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. It is in the fourth stanza that the speaker directly draws our attention to the graves in the country churchyard. We are presented with two potentially conflicting images of death. Line 14 describes the heaps of earth surrounding the graves. In order to dig a grave, the earth must necessarily be disrupted. Note that the syntax of this line is slightly confusing. We would expect this sentence to read, where the turf heaps, not where heaps the turf. Gray has inverted the word order. Just as the earth has been disrupted, the syntax imitates the way in which the earth has been disrupted. But by the same token, the root forefathers buried beneath the earth seem entirely at peace. We are told that they are laid in cells, a term which reminds us of the quiet monastery or that they sleep. So here we see an image of a graveyard or churchyard where there are rugged elms, the old elm tree, and elm trees are associated with death, with graveyard, and also yew tree. Yew trees are also related with graves or graveyard, death. There are some graves on which the heap of earth, and underneath the people, the forefathers, meaning the old persons of this hamlet, of this village, are sleeping. And they are also called rude. Why rude? Probably rude is used to refer to their illiteracy, their poverty, and some negative aspects. The breezy call of incense-breathing morn, the swallow twittering from the straw-built shed, the cock's shrill clarion or echoing horn, no more shall rouse them from the lowly bed. If the forefathers are sleeping in their graveyard, however, the speaker reminds us that they will never again rise from their beds to hear the pleasurable sounds of the country life. The term lowly beds describe not only the unpretentious graves in which the forefathers are buried, but the humble conditions that they endured when they were alive. Now he is talking about the persons who are sleeping in the cell, in the graves, that nothing can arouse them, and they will not be able to listen to the natural songs and sounds like swallows twittering. Shrill clarion means the cocks make a shrilling sound in the morning, or the echoing horn. Echoing horn means most of them were shepherds or farmers, and what shepherds do, they use horn to gather or scatter their cattle. So all these things will never make them rouse from their lowly bed, from their deathbed. For them no more the blazing hearth shall burn, or busy housewife ply her evening care. No children run to lisp their sire's return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. These dead people will never be alive, and they will not be able to enjoy the pleasures of work, pleasures of plowing the fields, and pleasure at home. The speaker moves on to consider some of the other pleasures the dead will no longer enjoy: the happiness of home, wife, and children. So for them, there will be no hearth fired or blazed, and for them, no longer their housewives will take care, or when they will return home, their children will come to have a share or a kiss from their father. When our fathers come home, we run to him or them, or we compete. If you are more than one siblings, you run there, or you have a race to reach your father to have the first kiss. Oft did the harvest to their sickle yield, their furrow oft the stubborn glaive has broke. How jocund did they drive their team afield, how bowed the woods beneath their sturdy stroke. When they were alive, they used to have their daily works in the field. They used to have harvest in their field. They used to cut their harvest with their sickle, and their furrow would broke the hard piece of the earth. And they were very glad, jocund, when they used to work in the field. With heavy stroke, they bowed the woods. This stanza points to the way in which the elegy written in a country churchyard contains elements of both Augustan and Romantic poetry. Poetry that describes agriculture, as this one does, is called Georgic. Georgic verse was extremely popular in the 18th century. Note that Gray closely identifies the farmers with the land that they work. This association of man and nature is suggestive of a romantic attitude. The Georgic elements of the stanza almost demand that we characterize it as typical of the 18th century, but its tone looks forward to the Romantic period. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope that you have understood up to this stanza. And as this is a long poem, we will have a number of videos, and try to read these sections and try to understand them. And if you have any question, write in the comment box. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.